Okay, I'm good to go.
Should we start up?
Yeah, can you hear me? Is that quality okay?
Yep.
Great.
Hello, guys. So the premium groups are always nice and small, so we get to customize things more than usual for you. So this session is going to be designing your Yin experience or your own Yin experience. So with the small group, it's actually even more helpful because this is going to be, we've planned it to be interactive. So if you have a notebook to write in, that will come in handy. If not, see if you got one that you can grab. So, yep, take your time. So, Cedric, did you have anything you wanted to start with in terms of introing our plans?
Not specific now, but I mean, I can start, but if you have something, go ahead.
Well, I guess I can just summarize, like what we're going to do is go over a couple of prompts to help you start thinking about designing a Yin experience for yourselves. And are you guys, is this all kind of like new to you, this Yin yoga stuff that you've been exploring this weekend, or you've done Yin before? Or... Okay.
I think I even remember Jana from last year. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just here to say thank you again. Yes, I was in the middle of my 500 hours teacher training, and Yin was part of it actually in our case. So,
Cool.
but there is always different aspects to Yin, and I really enjoyed your sort of modern and different approach to it, because we were very restricted with all just focusing on only the postures that Bernie Clark wrote about. So it's like we were told, like, just keep on teaching that for a year and then you can start developing. And I just felt like, nah. Nah, sorry. And that was so I learned so much from you guys last year to just sort of expand and just trust my instinct and my guts in how to work with it. So, but there's a lot of things that bear repetition. So I'm very happy to hear about whatever you hear about.
Nice. So that might be something that we can kind of adjust things for designing a Yin experience for yourselves individually, if that's something you're looking for, or designing a Yin experience for teaching and for students, if that's something that would be more helpful for you. So we want to make this as helpful for each of you as possible. So feel free to kind of jump in with questions as we go. And then shall we jump, Cedric, into the prompts, or did you want to talk about designing kind of a Yin experience in general?
Yeah, I mean, I already have something in mind to designing a Yin experience in general, which, how do I pronounce your name? Jana or Jana?
Jana.
Jana, okay. Touched on is that there is one important rule in Yin Yoga we should not forget. We have to make sure that the students and ourselves are staying healthy throughout the sessions. And because we cannot tell from the outside, and that is the special thing in Yin, we have to pass the idea on that they have to take care for themselves. And that actually can be quite easy, because the only rule that exists is don't feel pain. So you can really get wild in doing a yin practice. And as long as you don't feel pain, or your student, you cannot do wrong. Nevertheless, there are like approaches to arrive at different or specific targets or effects in the people's bodies or in your own body. So I think we can speak a little bit more open to what could what could yin be, if we just apply no pain and maybe stillness, because those two I would say define yin. And then look a little bit more into systems which describe a little bit more in rigid or a framed approach of what yin yoga could look like, either that is following a meridian system, a chakra system, a physical approach, or whatever.
And expanding on that too, like the individual targets for the poses and the parts of the body in a session, it's helpful to think too what kind of overall kind of, I guess, target for the feeling of the session you want. So like I kind of think about yin in terms of like depth of experience, not that like deeper is better, but just that you can have a yin experience that pretty much knocks you out by the end of class, and you kind of just float out of the room like kind of almost a bit disoriented even sometimes, but it's just a very deep experience. And then there are other experiences that might have you leaving relaxed and kind of the tension out of the body, but still very much like awake and like ready for the day. So you can kind of consider some of that too when putting an experience together. Like, what do you need, or what are your students coming to you for? Is it like, what kind of depth or feeling do you want for at the end of the session? All right, so shall we get into the prompts then?
Yeah, except Joan, do you also have specific questions or anything you want to ask, or you want to state shortly where you are at?
Yes, I mean, I'm a student. But I am looking into going into teaching. At the moment, obviously TJ knows Josh quite well. I go to his studio, so I do classes with him, and also Verity that you trained, and Xana as well. And Xana as well. So I regularly do classes with them. Verity does 3 classes a week that focus on all different things. One would be the theme of meditation, another one would be more of a deep stretch, and another class would be looking more at the elements. So I get quite a good all around yin perspective in practicing, which is very good at the moment. But I'm sort of looking into doing the training as well, so that's where I'm at the moment.
Nice. I literally, before I came on this video, I was texting with Josh. It's so funny.
Yeah, he's been in Dubai about 2 days now, so
I know, it's crazy. Right.
So
yeah,
I mean, obviously his classes are very good as well. He doesn't teach yin so much at the moment. He tends to cover, but he's looking more into doing more sort of like a yin yang class when he comes back from Dubai, which will be very good. So yeah.
Nice. All right, so let's get into the prompts, and we can start kind of hearing some of your thoughts on these in putting a practice together. And again, keep in mind, if you are thinking for yourself putting a practice together, or you can just come up with a generic student in mind or class and put a practice together for someone else. So the first we have is to list, or it's probably helpful if you write it down, but you don't have to if you can keep it in your mind, 3 struggles or obstacles of your personal practice, or that you see in coming up when you try to put a practice together for yourself or for a student. So 3 struggles or obstacles. And then we can maybe share what those are and address them as we go, maybe. So what comes to mind for you guys? Yeah, take your time.
I just had it there, it was gone. I was like, oh. Um, so are we both ready, or shall we?
Yes, yes, ready.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so what have you guys got? What comes to mind first?
The resentment to use props for students, not for me, because I love that, but I experienced that a lot, whether it's normal or hatha yoga or yin yoga, the resentment to really rely on props or not knowing how to use them. Then
Like kind of like a resistance to props, as if it's like cheating or something like that.
yeah. It's like, oh, well, I can do that. I don't need anything. You know, it's
yeah.
like I can do it like that. So the second one is actually related to that. That is hypermobility in joints. So people go in so deep they don't use props, for example, because they can just do it, whether it's good for them or not. And the third is just the aim for perfection, like, you know, I have to lie flat on the floor with my chest, for example.
Yeah.
Just
Great.
that I consider, I don't know if that's right, but that's what I consider obstacles in putting classes together.
Absolutely.
Students.
Yeah, those are great. And what did you have, Joanne?
Yeah, actually pretty much the same sort of things. More as well the breathing with yin, because obviously some people, it's obviously your own breath, whereas other teachers would like you to use a more structured breath practice while doing yin. So more in that sort of sense of things.
Nice. Yeah. So we can kind of go through these each one and kind of just give some thoughts on it. And then if you guys have any follow-up questions or want us to refine anything, but I think that might be the most helpful for you guys. We'll just address each one. Yes, Cedric, cool. So with like prop resistance, I find some of it might depend on like the way props are presented. Like usually, and again, like you can let me know if you have specific instances where you've seen students kind of resist, and maybe I'm kind of going down the right path or not with this. But I'll usually have just props all around me as the teacher, because a lot of times they'll look to the teacher for what's okay, like what's expected. And in my home practice, I don't use props. Like I'll maybe occasionally, but I don't always find that I need them too much. But when I teach, I'll have them all around me, and I'll just kind of like try to show a few prop options. And the terminology I find is helpful too, because if you present props in the same way we would present them in other yoga styles, they do come across as like crutches almost. Like, well, if you can't do it, put this here. But with yin, the terminology has to be more like, there is no doing it. Like there is no, you've done it or you haven't done it. It's just a matter of, are you feeling it? Like where you want to feel it in the way you want to feel it? If not, then find a way. So it's more process oriented, in which case the props are part of the process, and body position is part of the process, rather than outcome oriented, where it's more like we're trying to get the body in this shape. And so if your body can't do that shape, oh, what a bummer, here's a prop. That's kind of an exaggeration, of course, like no one teaches like that, but that's typically, I think, the language, and seeing you as the teacher utilize them is very helpful. Just to see that we all have different bodies, and I can hold a pillow to make it more comfortable, or put blocks here to make it more comfortable, and kind of speaking in terms of like comfort rather than can your body do it on its own, as like a challenge almost.
Yeah, but do you use more props than during the practice at all, instead of just, you know, sort of, do you adapt your own practice? So even though you would rather do it the other way, but just to show, just to be a role model for, you know, making it comfortable.
You mean like when I demo to a class?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I kind of I just put the props in all different places that I think they can go. So I'm not actually like doing the pose to where I would feel what I need for me, for my personal practice. I just kind of mime it in a sense of like, here's just generally how the body's positioned, and here's all the things you can do with props. And I kind of treat it almost like play. Like if the props are toys and cozy little things to snuggle up with, like nobody's gonna not want that. Like, oh, give me some toys, give me some like cuddly things to like hug. And then it feels more inviting and kind of like you want those things almost. You may have the opposite problem, like where people try only with props and like maybe their body doesn't need it in one particular spot or the other, but they just like all the cuddly things. And in that case, it just kind of gets more restorative, which is fine. Cedric, did you have anything you wanted to add? I think you're muted.
Yes. For me, basically, it's also very much about the introduction at the beginning. So I often say yin yoga is the opposite of yang yoga, because it actually is. We don't want to hold poses, we want to relax into poses. We don't want to activate, we want to relax. We're working passively, and the same way I introduced the practice, I also introduced the props. In yin yoga, it's the opposite. We want to use props as much as possible. That's one way of me introducing the props as something good and something that is part of yin practice. Sorry, the cat is playing here.
I thought it was the cat.
So just setting the props as something that is part of the practice from the beginning helps. And my second take on it is actually, if people don't want to use props, that's all right. Let them be without props. That can be yin yoga. It can actually be a very good yin yoga practice. So props are not necessary in yin yoga. For some poses, they're very, very, very helpful, but you can almost do every pose without props. The problem which comes is they just suffer a little bit more, and it's really up to them. If they want to suffer, they suffer. But what you also can do, and I would recommend, is not just let them suffer. So you want to educate your students bit by bit. So that's a process. And in the beginning, maybe they will be in a, let's say, the Paschimottanasana, the caterpillar, and the head is down. And that's an intense stretch on the neck and the whole back body. And if they have done 2 yin classes and they feel like, okay, I could use something to help myself to be a bit more relaxed, maybe they do it by themselves. But if we start to educate them slowly and gently to say, the props are there to help you. And it's not about achieving in yin. It's not about how deep we can stretch or how flexible we get. And that's really a mindset thing, because we live in this world where achieving is everything. And yin yoga is the opposite. Yin yoga is just seeing where does the journey takes me. So it is a process of educating your people and yourself maybe, and relaxing a little bit out of, I have to get somewhere. Because if you don't need to get somewhere, you probably naturally use a prop because it's just much more comfortable. That's my take on it.
Nice.
And we got another person joining, Bree.
Yeah.
We just had a little round of asking for your obstacles in practice or in teaching. If you have anything you want to share as well, feel welcome to unmute yourself and tell us. But it's also totally fine if you just listen.
And the next one was hypermobility. And we can just kind of generalize this as like people's range. Hypermobility in and of itself is, I find, one of the trickiest things to kind of talk about and try to like wrap my head around as a yin teacher, because I've heard different things from different sources, and I've also seen different people with hypermobility explain different experiences they're having. So some places are like, oh, hypermobility, like you shouldn't go to end ranges, you shouldn't do this, or you have to be careful with that. Other places I've read seems like it's okay, like hypermobility isn't inherently bad. But then what's most important is the student's experience. And I've had some students with hypermobility who can go really far into a pose, like you were saying. And some will say it's painful to be there. So they can go to an end range, like really, really far, like in a forward fold, face to the floor or their knees. And some will say like, hey, Derek, some will say like that's painful to stay there in that, even though they can go there. And so for them, it's kind of like, okay, that's a hypermobile person where their end range can be attained, but is not nice to be there. It's painful and we don't want pain in yin. So for them, you want to prop and bring them out and make them more comfortable. So it's kind of like, you've gone this far. Is it comfortable? Is it painful? If so, let's bring you out. And that's the simple thing about that, is that that's the same response you have to pretty much anyone. So then there's some people who have hypermobility and they say it doesn't bother them. Like there are poses where like you're up on your arms and their elbows go out really far, which if you ask some people who have opinions of hypermobility where they say, oh, you shouldn't do that. But some people with hypermobility, it doesn't bother them. And so it's like, who is right? Like maybe there's scientific studies behind it and that can be like looked into. But I tend to kind of try to find some middle ground of the information available. And so it seems like if a student is fine with the hyper range in a position and it's not painful and it's not increasing in discomfort as time goes on, then it's okay. And another thing to check too is how does it feel like a day after the practice or a couple of days after? If it's painful, then it's like, well, okay. And that's why it's important in yin not to overdo it in a single session, because sometimes we're just gathering information. And I tell students on the first day of the trainings, like, don't overdo it on the first day because we've got 8 more days of this practice. So it's like always kind of, if you're unsure about something with hypermobility or with like some position or new pose, just try it in a much more not as far into your threshold position where you're not really feeling that much. You can probably sit there and like not really get a stretch out of it, but then just see how you feel the next day, either for you or for a student with a hypermobile range. Cedric?
Yeah, and again, often those hypermobile people, because they're so flexible, have the idea to the deeper the better. And that's just not necessarily the goal of yin yoga. And secondly, because they're hypermobile, often like completely in the maximum range possible, because they are flat on the floor with their chest, let's say, or wherever they're like they cannot stretch deeper. And then they say, I don't feel anything, because they're so flexible that there is no strong stretch. And I don't feel anything is actually not possible. You always feel at any time something in your body. And it's all right if you imagine the target, the goal in yin yoga is to feel a stretch. It's okay to not have a big stretch, just a very gentle one. And everybody can find somehow a position where they feel a gentle stretch, or even without a stretch. It could be still yin yoga when there is awareness of body sensations. So if you speak of a physical level practice, so that is okay.
So you'd, for example, say like, but you feel that your chest is touching the floor, for example, feel your chest on the floor, feel the length of your arm, feel the width of your rib cage or stuff like that. If they feel like they don't feel anything because it's just like nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what do you feel? Just stay with the sensations that are present. And it doesn't matter if that's a stretch or if it's not a stretch, just stay with the sensations. And I can imagine there are a few people who are so flexible, but everybody will feel a slight stretch. It's just they are not so tuned to subtle changes or subtle stretches because they are so flexible. So it's going just deeper into sensory awareness, I would say.
Yeah. And I think on that note too, like when you talk to people about like, I mean, on the topic of like, I don't feel anything, because students will say that sometimes, or sometimes we'll feel like, oh, I'm not getting what I thought I should get out of this. Like, tap into something that's more subtle, like, because sometimes people think feeling something should be extreme, like, oh, I should feel it, you know, like sometimes even bordering on pain. Like people, I've had students where they're in a really deep pose and they're grimacing and I'm like, they'll call me over, am I doing it right? And I'm like, do you, like, what do you feel? And they'll be like, I don't feel anything. And I'll be like, that's not the face that they're making. And sometimes they equate feeling something with pain. So they're basically saying like, I don't feel pain. And so you kind of have to rewire their understanding of the terminology you're using, and get it down to a more subtle degree, which, like Cedric said, could be a stretching sensation on a very subtle level, or even just the sensations going on in your body in general.
Or just simply say, do you feel your breath?
Yeah.
Yes. Then stay with the breath. And that's a huge task to do. I mean, stay with your breath for 5 minutes.
Yeah. And I think that that's a perfect segue into what Joanne was asking about breathing in the practice. And so I think what you were saying, Joanne, is like the expectation that, or guiding that a teacher may give in a practice may not mesh with how you just naturally want to breathe. Is that
Yeah.
I'll give you my opinion on it, and I don't know if it's right or not, but it's what I do. Like if I go to a class and a teacher is telling me breathe this way, or inhale now, exhale this, or just some way of talking about my breath that I just am not syncing with, I completely ignore them because they don't know how I'm breathing. So like you can do whatever you want. And I think that's coming from me as a teacher who doesn't prescribe any kind of breath to students. There's going to be other teachers who, like, the way they're describing the breath is integral to the experience they're trying to create for the students. And so they may have different reasons why they may say I'm wrong. And in those cases, I may be. I just know for myself, like, and I usually in yin yoga, I don't find people prescribing how I should breathe too much, but I go to do like qigong or other more active practices. And if my breath is just not syncing with what they're saying, I just follow how it's naturally going. That's my approach. Cedric, what's your thoughts on breath? Because you teach other styles of yoga where breath is more prescribed.
Yeah, exactly. And when we look at Hatha yoga, I mean, the word itself says already forced, and that's because they force the breath. They want to use the breath as a tool to have an effect. So the breath can be a good tool to bring people somewhere to relaxation in this case. But in yin yoga, I would be careful and I would do it very gentle or not at all. So generally speaking, my opinion on breath work in yin yoga is let it be natural, because we don't want to manipulate the body. In yin yoga, we want to have a passive practice. That's like the general idea of yin. And if we form the breath or shape it, we transform it into an active practice. And that's not the core idea. Nevertheless, I also use it sometimes because the breath is a great tool. The breath is connected to our nervous system and to the heart. So by doing, just in the beginning, for example, a breath exercise that is the square breath, like for inhale, for holding, for exhale, for holding, or just bring the exhale much longer than the inhale, you send the body the signal to completely relax. And that's helping people to get more in tune with themselves. So it can be a tool. In the poses itself, I would leave the breath to its natural state for another reason. That is, when the breath is an indicator if you are in a state that is healthy for your body. If the breath suddenly changes to quick, shallow, or holding the breath, or very heavy breath, you can be almost sure that you are too far in the stretch, because then your body reacts to it and then the breath reacts to it. So the breath can be a very good measuring tool where you are at your pose. And if you're too deep, the breath represents that, shows that. So fine-tuning people and students or yourself to pay attention to how the breath is and if it's effortless or not can be a measurement if you're like in the stage of yin, or if you're actually pushing or pulling, or if you're leaning towards active or yang. So that's why general rule is more natural breath. If you want to have an effect, use it as calming down and yeah, basically that. What I do is sometimes I say, or I guide people to breathe a little bit more with the belly, because that's just often not done in daily life so much, and that relaxes people as well and brings more awareness to the body. So the belly breathing is something that is it's a little bit of guided and not completely natural, but I like it, especially in the beginning of classes, to do it for myself, because it's just beautiful, relaxing, and tunes you within somehow. Is that helpful?
Yes, that is. Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
And I think so. Jana had also mentioned perfection, or students' desire to get to perfection. We addressed a little bit of that, and I think we can come back around to it after we go through the other ones if we still have time, just for the sake of making sure we get through these 2 more prompts. So the next prompt, and Derek and Bree, if you have like a notepad and a piece of paper, it's just kind of helpful to write these down if you want to share. So the next prompt is goals or outcomes of practice. Like for this practice that you're either thinking about putting together, or we're just kind of exploring, or for students, if you're a teacher, what goal or outcome would you like for this particular practice, or just thoughts on it in practice in general? And you can write down as many as come to mind. We'll just share a couple.
I find I don't often have a set goal in mind when I come to my practice. Sometimes it's just, I just want to practice.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll have a goal of I want to calm down, or I want to relax, but often it's just, I just want to do some yoga.
Just because like you're familiar with how it makes you feel, and
Yeah,
like you just want that feeling.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know that I will relax if I do this, but I don't go into it with a set goal of I must be relaxed within X number of minutes or by the end of the practice. Because I find that when I first started doing yoga, I had that expectation that it would relax me. And I found that if I went in with a goal of I will be relaxed, if I didn't reach that goal, or if something interrupted my practice or whatever, then I'd get disheartened. So it's like I don't go into it with a goal now, because if I don't go into it with a goal, I can't fail. So it's like if I go into it with the goal and I don't meet that goal, then I fail, and it kind of undoes all the good work that yin does.
Yeah.
So to avoid undoing that, I don't bother with the goal. So the goal almost is then just to be, just to practice.
And sometimes that's like what we need from the rest of our life, being so goal oriented. Sometimes the best goal is to have no goal, because it's just like, thank God, something where I don't have to have anything particular happen. Let me just do it.
I can't fail at this because there's nothing to fail at. I'm just being. I'm just in the moment.
Nice.
Yeah, I totally agree with that as well, because I think yin is for not for being any expectations. It is a practice, and every time you go to the mat, you're going to have a different experience depending on how you're feeling on that day. So I think exactly the same. I go to practice yin. I know just being still for me is enough, and what I get out of it at the end of the practice is a bonus. So yeah, I totally agree with that as well.
Nice. And what else? What about for like teaching or student-based things? Jana, any thoughts or things for when you structure stuff?
My main idea is actually that students should spend some time with themselves and on themselves. So this is really to connect with themselves, which is basically all styles of yoga, but I think it's particularly present in yin yoga. And I'm trying to improve their nervous state and yeah, pain from tightness, from all this holding yourself together.
Yeah.
That is but actually I very often used, I was very ill last year, and I used yin yoga to function. So I got up in the mornings, and the first thing I did, was an hour of yin yoga, and that sort of gave me the strength, because sleeping didn't give me enough. It didn't fuel me enough, and yin yoga was the stuff that really fueled me. So I had the energy to then make myself a coffee and start working. So that was quite, that is something that I would like to share, but of course that's very individual and not many people have that. So luckily, but
no, I'm
Yeah.
I'm the same. I mean, I did share earlier on that I suffered with PTSD for many years, and yin yoga for me has been the only thing that has helped me through and helped me heal. I mean, normally I was constantly in my head the whole time, and my body wasn't, I didn't even figure out how it was feeling until I actually discovered yin yoga and could actually feel and stop and be still. It has been such a fantastic tool for me. It's part of my life now, so I wouldn't be without it.
Nice. Yeah. It sounds like everyone kind of has like an intuitive trust in the practice that's almost beyond description, because like we could kind of dissect what each of you said and be like, oh, well, this is a goal or this is an outcome you're looking for, but it's more just like knowing that the practice does for you, like the stuff that your body kind of thrives in some way or another. It's kind of neat actually to hear you guys say that. I hadn't really thought about it like that before.
It's also beautiful to hear that story, and you're sharing it. And I believe that it will motivate also other people which I believe are many out there. It's not just you or a few. I also use it often to function, because it resets somehow my whole system, and then I can continue my day. And I think those deep intrinsic motivations, they motivate other people to try it out and to go deeper and trust it. And it's probably good to share that, and it makes it personal. So why not?
I think too, now that we're kind of talking about it in this way, I'm thinking about like my practice, and one thing I find interesting is, since each of your, I'll call them goals for lack of a better term, the fact that you know the practice will do certain things for you that you like. I find it's interesting for me to kind of tweak little things here and there too, because I know like exactly how you're saying. I feel similarly that I do practice when I know there's a certain feeling I have of like need for it. And so I know this practice will do that for me. So then I do it. And then I'll kind of like play with different elements, like in the room, or like what kind of lighting do I find more conducive. I practiced a long time without music, just because like what was going on in my body was enough. And more recently, I've been kind of experimenting a bit with music for my home practice, because I found it's either changed, or I just needed that for some reason or another. Or maybe I've just found music recently that I've really liked for yin yoga. But like kind of seeing in what ways I can either amplify things that I like about yin, or reduce distractions to the practice, in that moment, or what poses I do, or what kind of sequence, what pose I like before another pose, or just playing with duration. Like I did one time a 2-hour yin practice, maybe a couple times a while ago. And I remember the feeling of that practice was so different. Like I came out of it feeling like I had time traveled, like, just for lack of a better way to describe it, because it made me move and feel like I was moving, like after the practice, like through honey or something, like as if you were just like moving through this, like really, like everything felt slow. And I love that. And it kind of made me realize like I can play with different durations of my session. And some days all I can do is like one pose. It's like, this is what I have time for. And so I'll do the one pose because I know even that will do something. But like playing with the elements involved to amplify what I already know I want from the practice intuitively can sometimes bring about things that will stay in my practice after that. Because it's like, oh, this works, I'll keep doing this when I practice. And then other things where it's like, that didn't do anything, so I won't do it again. That can be an interesting approach. All right, so the last prompt that we have is, and again, this is all towards like designing a yin experience for yourself or students. So parts of the body you want to focus on. Like if you were coming to this session to kind of put together a sequence, like, and there are parts of the body, depending on how familiar you are with yin poses, we can give you some different poses to try. Or if there's areas, poses, or areas of the body that are difficult in some way to access, we can give you some suggestions to try. For me, it's always kind of thinking about my knees. My partner at the moment is pregnant, and so we're trying to do yin together, but trying to work around the limitations of her belly. And so like it's interesting, like different things you have to figure out in the practice. So if you have, you can jot down or just kind of give some areas of the body, either for pose suggestions or different propping positions to access them.
I have the same issue having to work around my belly, but it's not because I'm pregnant, I'm just fat.
Bellies all have different dimensions at different times to work around. I've had some big meals sometimes before doing yin, and it can be quite tricky. Yeah, it's like working around different body parts and things. Sometimes it's a matter of like what exactly the body part is, like how like malleable it may be. Sometimes it's like a bone thing, like the range of my hips like are just never going to go to a certain position because the bones limit that. So like if I want a good stretch to my inner thighs and my legs can't go any further because of the bones, like maybe I can do it with one leg or something like that at a time. There's students who, for one reason or another, sometimes like with women, like doing like a pose like this, like closed wing, breast tissue gets in the way. And so like having to do that with one arm at a time. My partner's trying different things because like she wants to get some forward folds to like relieve some lower back and mid back kind of things. And that direction is what would help. But since she can't go very far in that direction, we're trying, can side bends give the same kind of relief to the lower back? And I mean, it is, you're stretching some things attached to the spine. You're just doing it in a different direction, or just different poses entirely. Like instead of a forward fold, it's like a squat, like owl pose is what I call like the balasana, like the full squat, because that will tuck the pelvis under. So that tucking of the pelvis under kind of stretches the back more. And with the legs in the position for the squat, sometimes there's more room for the belly. So it's quite interesting when you start thinking about it this way, almost like trying to work with the machine and figuring out like, well, if the machine won't go this way, maybe we can make it work over this way, instead of thinking about these things like a puzzle where it's like, well, this piece has to go here and it's the only way it will fit. It's like our bodies aren't like that. They're much more complex, and we can get at what we're trying to stretch from sometimes completely different poses than we thought possible. or just taking a pose and breaking it into two sides. So what can I do on this side of the body so that the other side can do whatever it needs to, and then just do the same amount of time on the other side of the body. That's one approach I'm finding is quite a bit more helpful than I ever realized. What else?
So my day job is, it involves sitting at a desk all day. So I'm sat down like 7-8 hours a day. So I'm finding that my two favorite poses at the moment are frog and pigeon. So they're concentrate on the hips, and yeah, I'm finding those incredibly relaxing at the end of the day.
No.
So even if I don't do anything else, I'll just do like a 5-minute frog or 5 minutes pigeon each side, something like that. So it's really helpful.
Nice.
And
Actually, I
also,
hadn't thought of frog. I always forget about frog. It's like the unsung hero of yin yoga poses. Sorry, Cedric, what were you saying?
yeah, I can also recommend you if you sit a lot, because then what you shorten is the hip flexors. So to stretch the quads and the hip flexors, that's the top side of your thighs and of your hip, the front side of your hip. And the dragon is a really good pose. It's a little bit like intense, but maybe you can prop it in a way so you can actually relax in that pose too, because it attacks the front hip flexor. And that's what you really don't use when you sit all day long. And most people are having a shortage. That's a word. You can have in muscles.
Yeah, hip
shortage.
flexor. Yeah.
Yeah, in that area. And the hip flexors are also the iliopsoas, like the very deep muscles that are connected to the spine. And they are not getting moved so much, but they are holding a lot of energy in them. So it's really beneficial to open that front hip side. Another pose is the hero, if you lean a little bit back, or a variation. I show you a variation of firefly. Can you see me here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what you want to stretch is this part, the front side of the hip and the front side of the knee. So one pose could be just being like the heels outside and then leaning back, if that's maybe already enough for you, or lying completely down, or if that's too much, sitting on a block and just lying a little bit or leaning a little bit back. So that's already working with the quads. Or to having one leg, so you open the legs a little bit, have one leg bent and then leaning to one side. And sometimes I'm just like this, and it's already like really opening the side. And if you prop it a little bit more under the hip, it's doing magic, just because that's the part you don't move when you sit, and it shortens by itself.
And I recommend that last one he just showed, that one-sided, because of my knees. I can't do both legs under, but that one-sided one's amazing if you're stretching the hip flexors and you have knee issues.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've got one dodgy knee, one knee that's okay. So that would be really good.
Sorry, say again.
Yeah, I said I've got a slight dodgy knee as well. So to do that with the prop on the one side would be a lot better.
Yeah, because it allows the hips, the pelvis to kind of move around to compensate for anything the knees don't like. It's very easy to kind of not get stuck in something that's becomes painful.
Yeah. And then eventually, for some people, for me, it's too much for my lower back, but you can lie just flat down on the floor like Shavasana and then put a bolster under the pelvis. So your legs kind of, you look like a banana a little bit. And
like supported bridge, right?
Just a little bit too much, but it's also opening the front side of the hips like this.
Yeah.
If you have knee issues, it's still opening here, but it doesn't involve the knee so much. Yeah.
I'm glad we've got you there with the whole setup for demonstrations. It's perfect. I don't have any space here. So we have a few more minutes. What else would be helpful for you guys in terms of designing a yin experience, or kind of refining a yin experience for practice? Questions or thoughts?
I do a lot of walking. I've got a very lively dog that I walk about 3 hours a day. So for me, even walking, sometimes I get quite a lot sort of stiff lower back. So obviously the best pose or poses for like if you do a lot of walking.
I would say, like, the thing that's interesting about yin yoga is like it's, I don't know if this is a broad statement that's going to come back around to prove false, but I think every pose kind of does something with your back. So you could do back bends, and generally you think, oh, well, that's the back poses. But forward folds are doing something to your back. Side bends are doing something to your back. Twists are doing something to your back. And it kind of, I would say, it comes down a little bit to like personal preference. Like for me, if my back ever gives me issues, I find a twist, like twisted roots or twisted deer, does amazing stuff. And are we going to do some drawings?
Yeah, sorry, I just discovered this, but I want to draw something, so it's handy. Keep talking. I try to.
So I'm a visual person, so I'm so like, what was I talking about? This is fascinating.
Sorry.
But yeah, for back issues, like my go-to is twisted roots or twist poses. Side bends can be really relieving because those are two positions of the spine we don't typically do. But then there's like a back bend, like seal pose. So I think probably if you cycle through in your practice a few different ones, you'll find ones that are just like, oh yeah, that's the one for my back.
Okay, I have two things, and I try to keep it short.
Cedric, by the way, just for transparency, Cedric writes to me in a private message, let's try to end at 5:55 if it's possible. And then he breaks out the whiteboard and starts drawing a chart.
That's right, it will go fast. It will go fast. You have the next class, so you have to be out on time. So you see a pie. That's what I can recommend for personal practice, because it describes the 6 directions in which your spine can move. And if you do yin yoga as personal practice, I would recommend to do those 6 directions in every practice. It doesn't need to, but it's healthy to move the spine every day in all 6 directions. And when we sit a lot or just walk, then it's often not doing that. So number 1 and number 2 is forward fold and back bends, like folding the spine forward and bending it back. 3 and 4 would be twisting the spine right and left. So you want to have a twist both sides. And 5 and 6 is then side bending the spine to one side to the other side. So if you can create a yin practice that has all 6 of them, that is like a healthy spine needs all of those directions. And number 2, towards regarding your walking, what I experience in my body is that I have a strong back, and the back pulls more than my front side because my front side is not strong enough. And that's why I get a little bit itching in the back. That means strengthening the front side brings a little bit more space in the back vertebrae. So the idea would be doing a yin practice and then a few sit-ups. Just in general, strengthening the front side probably helps when you have pain in the lower back after walking, because just your front is not strong enough and then you collapse a little bit in the back.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because as a yin teacher, like that's all I teach. I forget a lot what the yang practices can do. And for my own practice, like I've found so much relief from strengthening different areas rather than just trying to stretch them all the time. So yeah, that's an awesome point.
Yeah, I do 2 or 3 vinyasa classes a week as well. So
Nice. Well balanced.
so yeah, try and get the balance of both.
So as Cedric said, I'm teaching a class in another room on the end of the hour. It's going to be magic and yin yoga. It's going to be a really out there lecture. So if you're interested in hearing me ramble about some wild philosophical stuff, hop over into that room. But thank you each for coming. And definitely feel free to message me anytime if you have more questions. I love chatting about this stuff. And Cedric, you want to close it up?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.